It was a beautiful spring day in the city of Madison, Wisconsin, and Lucy was excited for a meeting she had at a restaurant with her new boss from a renowned advertising agency. At the age of 31, Lucy was living the best time of her life, writing a beautiful story alongside her husband Joe, had just gotten the job of her dreams, but she would never imagine what fate had in store for her that day. When she arrived at the restaurant, Lucy saw her husband's father with his mistress, and what he did next was unbelievable. Some time ago, Lucy and Joe worked in the same agency, and that's where they met and fell madly in love as soon as they laid eyes on each other. Lucy was an only child and had moved to the city as a teenager with her parents, a very kind and loving couple who treated Joe like a member of their family as soon as they met him. Lucy came from a simple family. Her mother was a teacher and her father worked as a mechanic, but they always did their best to give their daughter a good education and life, which paid off in the end. On the other hand, Joe grew up in the city of Madison, and his parents were very rich, conservative people. His mother was at least polite, but his father discriminated against any human being who was not similar to them, especially when it came to wealth, not making the slightest effort to be polite when he found someone he did not consider his equal. Joe was a good man, despite being born into his family, but he had never been able to please his parents with any girlfriend he had. And unfortunately, it was not different with Lucy, who they seemed to not want to meet in person. They even missed their small wedding ceremony. Apparently, on the day of the ceremony, Joe's father felt sick and needed to rest, but Lucy didn't believe it for a second, as it wasn't the first time they made this kind of excuse when they were about to meet Lucy. Joe was upset, but he didn't believe that his parents did that on purpose, that in the perfect moment, everyone would get to know each other properly. Shortly after the wedding, Lucy and Joe were out shopping at the supermarket and bumped into Joe's mother. The man was excited that encounter was finally happening, but his mother just greeted them quickly and said goodbye, claiming that she was in a hurry. These people were so weird, Lucy thought to herself, but on the outside she kept her politeness and just said goodbye. "Baby, your parents don't want to know who I am, and it's okay. Let's let it happen whenever they want. I don't want to insist," said Lucy. But Joe really wanted her to get along with his parents, especially his father, who he idolized. Lucy had little patience for people who behaved like her husband's family. Lack of education, arrogance, these were things that got on her nerves, and that was apparently normal for them, which left her with no desire to get a close relationship with them. Meanwhile, the young couple's Sundays were often at Lucy's parents' house, who loved having barbecues and drinks in the backyard with fun conversations and good laughs that warmed their hearts. One day, Lucy needed to take the car to a repair shop, and the place was close to where Joe's father was. So the young man suggested that his father give them a ride to work, also thinking that it would be a great opportunity for him to finally meet his wife. Lucy was nervous, as she wasn't planning to meet her father-in-law at that moment, especially knowing that he didn't want to meet her. "It's okay, my love, I'll call him. I'm sure it'll be great," Joe said. However, his father arrived with a serious expression and remained so the whole way. He greeted Lucy and shook her hand, but that was the maximum interaction they had until they arrived at the agency. It was possible to cut the atmosphere in that car with a knife, and Lucy was very disconcerted, because even though they didn't exchange a word, she could feel a disapproving look from her father-in-law, and that was stuck in her mind for the rest of that day. 2 months passed without Lucy seeing her parents-in-law again, and she was focused on her professional growth and on her own marriage, which was going very well. After working for a few years at the advertising agency where she met Joe, she had just been hired to change companies and work at a larger agency, one of the most renowned in the city. Joe was very happy for his wife, and they were having dinner at home before Lucy's first day at her new job. when they got a call from Joe's father saying that his mother had been admitted after a drastic drop in blood pressure. The couple promptly went to the hospital, but when they arrived, Joe's mother's situation was under control and she was sleeping. This was the second time Lucy had seen them, and her father-in-law's reaction was even colder than the first time, and she didn't know what to do to change that. So she decided to go home to get ready for her first day at work in the morning, saying goodbye to her husband and in-laws, trying to hide her discomfort. The next day, Lucy woke up in a good mood and headed to the agency optimistically. It was a very pleasant morning, even better than she imagined. Her coworkers seemed to be very relaxed people, and her new boss proved to be a genuinely good woman. As Lucy didn't know that neighborhood very well, her boss suggested that they have lunch at a nearby restaurant, which she said had a wonderful cook called Susan, who made the best meals. Lucy agreed, and as soon as lunchtime arrived, they went to the restaurant with a few more colleagues. It was a small, simpler restaurant, but it exhaled an indescribable smell of homemade food, in addition to Susan being an extremely kind woman. She and Lucy instantly connected, and the young woman started to go to the restaurant often to eat Susan's delicious food and talk to her during her lunch hour. It was during one of these conversations that Susan told Lucy about her family. She lived quietly in a house above the restaurant with her husband, a very nice man who was always traveling, selling rugs to help support the humble home he shared with Susan. The woman always spoke well of her husband, who, in her words, was a true saint, a blessing in her life. After almost a month in the new job, Lucy and her boss arranged a meeting at Susan's restaurant to organize a new project for the company. Lucy was very excited, as it was a project she had dreamed up, but soon her excitement would fade completely. As soon as they entered the restaurant, Susan received them with a beautiful smile, saying, "Come on, I want to introduce you to my husband. He's in the bathroom. As he's always traveling, we need to seize the opportunity." When Susan's husband appeared, Lucy almost fainted. It was Joe's father. "This is Albert, my husband," said the nice woman, pointing to Lucy's father-in-law, while she remained completely silent, not understanding what was happening. "Husband? What do you mean, husband?" Lucy thought to herself. At that moment, the man realized it was Lucy, but acted as if he had never seen her in his life. He was extremely friendly and greeted them with a smile on his face. Lucy had no choice but to act as if she didn't know him either, because she didn't know what to think of that situation. Joe's father was about to leave, but Susan stopped him. "No, sir. You need to meet these girls. They are great. They have lunch here almost every day," said the cook. The man was pale. It looked like his soul had left his body when he realized he had to interact with Lucy and her boss. After a few words, Lucy immediately thought of an excuse to get out of that awkward moment and tried to reason. She pretended to receive an urgent message on her cell phone and ran out of the restaurant, leaving no chance for anyone to stop her. When she arrived at the office, Lucy threw herself on the couch. Her mind was completely confused. So Susan's husband, the humble man who traveled selling rugs, was Joe's father? It couldn't be true. Susan even said that they lived above the restaurant because her husband earned very little from the sales. What a ridiculous lie, Lucy thought. She knew that Joe's father earned very well, as he was a retired lawyer, very rich. So, in addition to having a double life, her father-in-law was a stingy man, as he hardly helped Susan with the expenses. The more Lucy thought about it, the more nervous she got, because she loved her husband very much, and didn't know if she should tell him or not, if she should investigate further to be sure what was going on. After all, from what Susan had told her, she had no idea her husband had another family. She had been with him for over 20 years and she didn't seem to know she was a mistress. In fact, even Lucy didn't know who the mistress was, whether it was Joe's mother or Susan. Still thinking, Lucy remembered that she had seen an old car parked in front of the restaurant, with several rugs rolled up in the back seat, and she knew Joe's father's car very well from the day he gave them a ride. It was a luxurious car, one of those very expensive ones, and Lucy could only see her father-in-law as a fake manipulator who pretended to be poor to Susan. But the only certain information Lucy had at that moment was that her husband's father had 2 marriages. A few minutes passed, and Lucy received a text from Joe, as they had talked about doing something together at night. In the text, Joe suggested they meet earlier so he could stay with his mother for a while, because his father had traveled to do volunteer work. Volunteer work? Only if the volunteer work is in Susan's bed. Lucy laughed with herself at that absurd situation and asked Joe what volunteer work his father did. Joe said that he traveled once or twice a month with a church group to help people in need, and then he started to give a speech about how his father was a charitable man who had traveled with this group for over 20 years and was a really admirable person. When Joe talked about his father, he forgot how he was against his marriage and extremely rude to Lucy. He became his hero, which made the situation even more complicated for Lucy to deal with. There was no simple way of saying, "So, your father has another wife, and he pretends to sell rugs to strangers." There was no good solution for that problem. The man didn't want to receive his daughter-in-law at the house, but Joe said it was because he was methodical, that at some point he would give in. She just needed to be patient. It wasn't out of patience, but as soon as Lucy's father-in-law got back from his fake volunteer work, Joe received a call from his father, and Lucy was apprehensive about whether Albert would tell his son about Susan. When Joe finished the call, he hugged his wife tightly, and the woman thought he might know something, but it was a happiness hug. "Honey, my dad finally wants to meet you. See, I told you that with patience, you would win the old man over. I'm really excited. My mom is going to cook us dinner on Sunday." The only thing left for Lucy was to wait until Sunday and see what would happen. Sunday came. It was the day of the big moment at her parents-in-law's house, and Lucy was very anxious, because until that day, she hadn't said a word about what she had discovered to Joe. She even rehearsed a way of telling him, but none of them sounded good, and she loved her husband and was afraid of something bad happening. They arrived at the house, or rather, the mansion of Joe's parents, and his mother was finishing setting up the dinner table. They greeted each other, and Joe went to help his mother, while Lucy stayed with her father-in-law. The man wasted no time, and soon took advantage of the moment alone to talk to his daughter-in-law. "Look, Lucy, I'm going to be very straight with you. Susan knows I have another family, and that works great for both of us. I hope you don't get involved in this, or it won't end well for you." Lucy couldn't react. Her father-in-law spoke naturally, looking into her eyes while taking a sip of whiskey, and he simply turned and grabbed Joe's shoulder as if everything was calm. After dinner, which Lucy barely managed to enjoy, Joe called her to see the album of his father's trip to do volunteer work, and the girl could only think, "Here it comes." And she was right. As soon as her husband opened the album, she saw several photos of the group from old trips, and Susan was in several of them. Lucy started to feel bad and called Joe to go home. They also had already spent a good amount of time there. When they said goodbye, Joe's father said, looking at Lucy, "You can come here any day and any time you want. The door will be open for you." But Lucy couldn't even be happy with that. While her husband literally had tears in his eyes, moved by his father's kindness. In the car, Joe continued, "Honey, it's official. Now we can come here any time. Spend the weekend with them. It'll be perfect." And Lucy only said, "Yeah, really cool." The poor woman barely slept that night, thinking about what to do, but she made the decision to go to Susan's restaurant, which she hadn't been to since meeting her father-in-law, to at least try to find out if Susan really knew something. When she arrived, the cook had a serious expression on her face. "Hi, Lucy, come with me. Let's sit in the back." They sat at a table, and Susan started talking. "You already know everything, right?" Lucy just looked at her, remaining silent, and Susan continued. I've known Albert for over 20 years because we used to do volunteer work with the same church group. But as you know him, you know that his wife is a sick woman. She has dementia and, poor thing, he cannot leave her in those conditions, and I understand him. Dementia? Lucy thought to herself. That lie was the last straw, and she couldn't keep to herself the secrets she discovered. There were 2 women being deceived by an impostor. A liar who abused Susan's goodwill, such a loving and kind woman. She couldn't hold it back. Lucy took a deep breath and interrupted her. I can't do this anymore. Susan, I need to tell you something. Actually, some things. Albert's wife doesn't have dementia. She's a very healthy woman. She even does Pilates. Look. Lucy held out her cell phone with a photo of her healthy mother-in-law. Albert had been lying to you and his wife all these years. And I know that because I'm married to his son, Joe. What? He has a son with her? Susan said, confused. I know it's a lot to take in, but I couldn't live with this anymore. Watching you idolize a horrible man like him. He's rich, Susan. He's a retired lawyer, one of the best, and he bought that old car and fake rugs to deceive you. Lucy got it all out, and when she was done, Susan was in shock and broke down in tears. Lucy promptly hugged the woman. I'm sorry, Susan. You don't deserve this. I want you to know that I'm by your side. I'll support whatever you want to do. When she calmed down, Susan said, We need to talk to your mother-in-law. What's her name? Rachel, Lucy replied. This poor woman. It won't be easy, but we have to put an end to all of these lies. Thus, Lucy and Susan teamed up and planned the best way to meet Rachel and decide together what they would do to end Albert's double life. Lucy got home and, inspired by Susan, took the courage to tell her husband the whole story, and if he didn't believe or stayed by his father's side, it wouldn't be easy, but she wouldn't want to be with a man who thinks like that. When she finished telling everything, Joe was perplexed. Lucy had shown pictures of the old car, pictures of Albert with Susan, all the possible evidence. Joe was devastated. He cuddled up to his wife and cried for a few minutes. It was a shock to know that his hero was a big fake, but he needed to be strong and support his mother at that moment, to be the opposite of what his father was. Joe pulled himself together and kissed Lucy's hand. And what are you going to do about that? He asked. Joe didn't agree very much, but he overlooked his mother and Susan's idea of revenge. Because his father was really very rich, he could easily get back on his feet. The 2 wives kicked the traitor out of the house, and with Lucy's help, they decided to find a reliable church to donate all of Albert's clothes, accessories, and everything that could be used by anyone in need. When the opportunity arose, the women took everything to the church together, laughing and making fun of Albert. Susan and Rachel changed the locks on their homes and sent the same text to their ex-husband, "See you in court." After that encounter between Lucy, Susan, and Rachel, who together discovered the strength they had within themselves, they supported each other and ended up becoming great friends. Susan and Rachel sued Albert and demanded everything they were entitled to after being deceived for more than 20 years. Since with Susan he had a stable union, and with Rachel he was married on paper, and in the end he also had to pay in cash for all the lies he told. Probably out of guilt, he paid every penny without raising any objections. Nowadays, the 3 women are very close. Susan and Rachel married other men, and Lucy still had Joe by her side, sharing the ups and downs of their lives. Everything is fine. But if at some point that changes, they will always have each other's friendship to overcome any difficulty. If you know any similar stories, write about it in the comments. Like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more fantastic stories.